In the 1940s, a comic book villain was born who would become one of the most incredible ever created. On the other hand, in 1821, in Russia, a boy was born who would later become a man and, in the future, would himself become one of the greatest writers in history. These two individuals have something in common, and this in common between them is intertwined with stories. But first, it must be said who they are. And when we shed light on these beings, we realize that they are completely different. The comic book villain mentioned is the Joker. For many, and according to the character's mythology, he is the counterpart to Batman, the Dark Knight. He is the psychopathic clown who has surrendered to madness. As for the writer, that would be Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky, born in Moscow, one of the most influential figures in literature and philosophy. And what about that thing they have in common? What do these two who are so different have besides pure difference? That's what we're going to explore through 3 absurd works that try to warn and make us aware of something very important. And without further ado, the first work is Notes from Underground. (1863). The book is released. Okay, but what does that have to do with anything, man? Hold on, little mention. Be patient and you'll understand. This story from 1863 is peculiar, not just because of the writer's talent, but because of the story itself. Because Notes from Underground is a book that, above all, depicts the psychology of a character whose name is never revealed, an anonymous man who, after retiring from his job as a civil servant, lives in isolation, without love, without work, and without truly living. Someone who does not desire because he suffers from wanting what he cannot achieve. Someone who blames everyone else for his own failures. Someone who lives in constant conflict, for immersed in his absurdist thoughts, he exists without any mental meaning. Yet, the frustration and melancholy that arise when he lives in the world of reason, rather than feelings, become his greatest monsters. On the other hand, he is also arrogant, seeing the world as beneath him, and himself as intellectually superior and above everyone else. So far above everyone else that a prostitute, his friend Lisa, hugged him out of pity. The narrator then tries to find himself in the underworld, in the sky beyond earth, but he is actually beneath it. In the underground, in the sewer, in the dirt, below everyone. Someone who is completely immersed in their thoughts is simply someone who could not fulfill their desires and thinks about it second after second. Is there impotence? But there is also vital force. Finding a force that makes you want to live is what determines how you deal with life. Georges Bataille, when he talks about eroticism, using Freud as a basis, Lacan, Sage, and other historical figures in psychoanalysis discuss that life is a work of continuity, that is, survival or reproduction, which passes through discontinuity, which is death. And Eros is not just about carnal relationships, it is also about the desire for its highest possible sense. By bringing together all the elements of continuity and discontinuity, of Eros and the underground narrator, we see that we are always running from death, but it is also completely surrounded by life. And how do we escape resentment, the immersion in our thoughts, and the loneliness of life? By facing oneself. A coward is someone who does not face and runs away from their own responsibilities, always living on excuses or blaming others. And it is from this source that the underground narrator drinks. Moving on to the next work, we have another piece by Fyodor, White Nights. Imagine living alone, without working, living with a housekeeper, where people distance themselves from you more and more, and you are not afraid to fantasize and dream. You are a 27-year-old child who doesn't know what melancholy is. You only care about better days, and that is where everything connects in your miserable life. This then is The Dreamer from White Nights by Dostoevsky from 1848. He is a character in whom not only men but also women recognize and identify themselves, because he is someone lonely, without love, without friends, but who fantasizes about loving and being able to say everything that is inside him in this life. But this recognition is false, because the character is everything that an ordinary human being is not. The dreamer, whistling near a pier, finds a woman at night who is crying. The reason is that her beloved fiancé had gone to Moscow and promised he would return in a year. And when he came back, he would give several signs so the two of them could meet and finally get married. A year and several days had passed since that very day being described, and he had returned, but he had not come to the young woman named Nastienka. The dreamer comforts her, the two become best friends, and he falls in love with her but is afraid to tell her. Then, a few days later, Nastienka comes up with the idea of writing a letter to her promised beloved. However, after she realizes that he hasn't replied to the letter, even days after it was written, she gives up on him. And the dreamer, after all this, breaks down and confesses his love. The young woman then had such admiration for the dreamer, and they realized that they loved each other with the same intensity. After that, they walked all over the city, in love with each other. And that night, a man stares intently at the two of them. It was the young man who had traveled. Nastenka, without thinking twice, runs to him, comes back to kiss the dreamer, and then leaves arm in arm with the young man as a couple into the horizon. At home, the dreamer, now devastated, receives a letter. The lady's letter says that she still loves the dreamer romantically and wished that both her future husband, who had returned from Moscow, and the dreamer were the same person. Even so, the narrator, at the end of the book, admits that he loves Nastienka and wished her all the best and happiness in her life with her future husband, with the following phrase, "My God, a whole world of delight. Isn't that enough for an entire human life?" A dreamer is someone who truly loves. He may seem like a fool in the eyes of many people, but he truly loves. Knowing this, even after everything, the dreamer realizes that he had good experiences with a woman, even though he never had a serious relationship with her. The dreamer also doesn't blame anyone, not even himself. However, he leaves alone. Because even though he wants it so much, even though he fights to be able to dream, he has difficulty making that dream come true. A dreamer is not a coward. He's just someone who is new to life, who hasn't had opportunities because when he did have one, he seized it immediately. However, the circumstances didn't help. You may judge him, but how many times have you met a woman younger than you are today, been like the dreamer? You were a dreamer. Even now, you might be just like him. But he truly loved and lived without resentment. And do you still find yourself identifying with him? Are you really someone without resentment? Let's move on to the next one. This one is the comic The Killing Joke from 1988, written by Alan Moore. And in the end, I'll show you that there are many similarities among the three we've discussed. The Joker was created in 1940 in the same magazine where Batman and Robin were created. After comic books were censored in the United States, he was set aside and later became a character in the 1960s Batman series, played by Cesar Romero.
50 times 20, $1 million. Oh!
After that, a peculiar phase in comics began. Superhero comics wanted to deal more with melancholy, frustrations, and darker ways of telling stories. In this way, Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams come in, creating the version of the Joker that lives in the collective imagination. And that's when The Killing Joke appears. And without beating around the bush, short motion, I knew you would be here. In the story, Joker escapes from Arkham Asylum, buys an abandoned circus, tells his origin story to speak shoots Barbara Gordon, and, well, commits some crimes that YouTube won't let me mention here, but it's pretty clear, right? He kidnaps Gordon, tries to drive him as crazy as he is himself, putting him on a ghost train where he shows disturbing photos of Barbara Gordon, his daughter. But Batman comes. The lines I want to highlight are: so how does he manage to live? How does this poor, pathetic specimen survive in today's cruel and rational world? The sad answer is, not very well. Faced with the undeniable fact that human existence is mad, random, and pointless, 1 in every 8 of them goes crazy. And who can blame them? In a psychotic world like this, any other claim would be madness. Joker claims that Gordon is someone who believes in a weak morality, that in a world where there is a person terribly afraid of making some silly mistake, there will come another with no fear of committing the most cruel crime of all for no reason at all, just to watch the world burn. Then Batman shows up and Joker continues with his lines. If I'm going to have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice. thus refuting the version of his story told in the comic. He simply chooses how he wants his past life to be. Do you know how many times we've been close to a third world war? Do you know what triggered the last great war? An argument over how many telegraph poles Germany owed its war creditors. Telegraph poles? It's all a joke. Batman then says that he's weak for letting himself be carried away by madness, but maybe smart enough to understand that fear and morality make no sense, because everyone breaks them. What do these three works have in common? What they have in common is that they all question reality. In fact, they all question human nature. The narrators of the first two works I presented here have no name, so the reader can put themselves in their place. That's why so many people identify with the dreamer. He has no name. I can put mine, yours, and everyone else's there. The narrator from underground questions life, sees no meaning in it, not even in living, and spends his whole existence resentful. The dreamer lives in solitude, but he dreams, he lives, he desires, he tries. The Joker questions morality, lives among many, doesn't desire, acts without thinking, manipulates Harley Quinn, and lives without resentment because all he wants is to watch the world burn. By questioning reality, we realize nothing makes sense, especially since Dostoevsky drew heavily from nihilism, a contemporary theme in his time. The character Joker sees that everything humanity has created is a bad joke on everyone. Inequality and violence don't need a murderous clown villain. These two elements alone just need one bad day. In the same way, you should question yourself. Living with resentment is to be either mad or a coward. Living on love is believing in a supposed lie that, once you are submerged in feeling, you realize is the greatest truth of all. Only the three works talk about questioning reality. By questioning, we discover the abyss. Looking into the abyss, which you hadn't noticed before, you are faced with several choices. If you stand still, it starts to look back at you. You become an object of observation for the abyss. If you throw yourself into it, you become a madman. Sometimes not even in a good way, as we see here. But trying to heal the abyss with love, desire, and searching can bring you many frustrations. However, it's what's necessary to open your heart and love life.